right, I think we're in business. We're only 7 minutes behind the schedule. All right, so a lot of people have been asking what my presentation was going to be about today. That was the other thing they didn't update on the information, the brochures, and all that kind of stuff. So, big surprise, I'm doing a presentation on AST Research. A lot of you may not have any idea what that is or why you should even care about it. So, I actually used to work for AST back in the 90s, and I think you'll find this pretty interesting. Hope so anyway. So, AST, of course, was a computer manufacturer, one of the biggest. And a lot of people always ask, well, what does AST stand for? Well, it stands for the first initial of the three guys, Albert Wong, Safi Qureshi, and Thomas Yen, who created the company back in 1980. AST was the third largest computer manufacturer in the world back during the mid-90s, right underneath Compaq and Dell, just to give you an idea of how big they were. They're largely forgotten today because they were just a PC clone manufacturer, and so they didn't do anything, you know, terribly historically important like Commodore or Apple or Microsoft or anything like that. But you know, I think, you know, for example, if Dell had gone out of business in 1997, I don't think a lot of people would probably remember Dell today, even though they were, you know, would have obviously been a pretty big company. So, you know, just trying to put things in perspective for you about AST and where they were in the computer world. Now, they actually got their start in the early 80s producing cards like this. So this is an AST Six-Pack Card. And what this was is it was a card that you could add to your IBM 5150 or some of the early clones. And it added a whole bunch of different stuff to it. You can see it added a whole bunch of RAM, and you got a real-time clock and some extra I/O ports, and there's a variety of other things that added. And it was cool because it bumped the RAM up to a full 1 megabyte of RAM on these early machines. And at the same time, like if you didn't have a lot of extra expansion slots in your computer, then that was cool because you could combine a bunch of stuff into one card and it would free up some slots. Now, AST produced these for years, and they actually also made them for the Apple II, and they also made them for IBM's MCA architecture, microchannel architecture, and stuff like that as well. However, this business was doing really well, and it started to go a little bit downhill because eventually computer manufacturers started putting this kind of stuff on the motherboards, and so there wasn't as much need for cards like this. And so AST decided to start producing computers. This is one of their early 286 computers that they originally started producing. And that business ended up doing really, really well. And at that point, they actually changed the name, well, shortly after that, from AST Research to AST Computer. And they also tweaked the logo just a little bit, as you can see here. And so, you know, if you find an old AST computer somewhere, it might have either one of these logos on there. Now, they did all of their manufacturing and all of their headquarters was in Irvine, California. And they were so successful that their manufacturing facilities there were overrun. They couldn't produce any more than what they were already making. And so they really needed to expand in order to be able to continue to keep up with demand. So where could they expand to? Well, you might guess Fort Worth, Texas. That's, of course, where I live, and that's where I've lived all my life, and, of course, that's how I ended up working there. Now, they didn't just expand to Fort Worth, Texas. They actually ended up working out a deal by purchasing Tandy Computer Products and Grid, which most of you should be familiar with. Now, what ended up happening here is that, of course, you know, Radio Shack had been selling Tandy computers successfully for a while during the 80s, but by the time the mid-90s came through, Tandy was really struggling with their computer business. And so they made a deal with AST, where AST was going to buy out their manufacturing facilities and all of the other buildings and stuff that they had there. And as a result, AST was also going to do tech support and other back-end warranty support and stuff for Tandy and Grid. And we were supposed to start selling AST computers in Radio Shack. However, for some bizarre reason, that never actually happened. But we did end up selling AST computers in Radio Shack subsidiaries like Computer City and Incredible Universe and some of the other ones that they had. And so anyway, moving along, looking at AST's, you know, kind of their profitability, so to speak. You see a big old rise, that little bump there, the little first bump is kind of when they started going downhill on their expansion products. And so And then you see when they took off with PCs, that were really good for a few years, and then they kind of hit their peak around 1994 or so, and then they started having financial difficulties. So what were some of the reasons they were having financial difficulties? Well, unfortunately, when they moved all the production facilities to Texas, the quality went down. And it wasn't anything to do with us Texas workers. It was the PC market had become very competitive at this point, and they tried to cut a lot of cost corners in order to be more cost competitive. And they had actually, AST had a really good reputation for good quality up until about 1994. And then the quality started to go down. In fact, just to tell you how bad the quality was, we had some computers, like the AST Ascension 950N, it was a laptop. The return under warranty rate for that computer was 110%. That is an actual figure I got from one of the guys that worked in the database numbers. Basically, every one of the machines had been returned under warranty at least once, and then 10% of them had been returned twice. These things were notorious for catching on fire, or just plastic parts just falling off of them. I mean, it was terrible. And we did build those there in the Fort Worth facility, and so they were pretty bad. Not all of the computers were bad. Don't get me wrong. They still had some good computers at that time too, but we also had some real stinkers that were just really killing the bottom line. Also, one of the problems is we kept with domestic production. We did all of our production there in Fort Worth, Texas, where a lot of the other manufacturers were starting to get their production done in Taiwan and China and Hong Kong, and of course, you know, with the cost, it's much cheaper there, and so that was another thing that, although they thought it was a good decision, probably in the end didn't work out so good for us. And then this, actually, number 3 is probably the biggest problem. We had what was called channel stuffing. A lot of our sales departments thought that, see, we went through dealers like Gateway and Dell. They didn't even build a computer until a customer had ordered it and paid for it. And AST, you know, we sold computers to even places like Walmart and, you know, Best Buy and CompUSA, Computer City, places like that. Well, when they felt like they weren't selling enough computers to the dealers, some of our salespeople thought, hey, I got an idea. Instead of buying 1 million computers from us today, why don't we sell you 2 million computers? And if you can't sell them all during the, you know, said allotted amount of time, well, you can just mark the price down and we'll pay the difference on the back end. And well, guess what happened, of course? You know, every time we sold a bunch of those computers, we ended up losing money on every single one of them. I remember when we made the deal with Walmart, everybody was talking about it, how, oh, this is going to save us. We're going to make so much money selling computers to Walmart. And we did. We sold millions of AST computers through Walmart. And then about 6 months later, they pulled the plug on the Walmart deal, and they came back and said, you know, we lost $200 on every machine we sold to Walmart. So, you know, so it was actually getting bad. The company was pretty much on the verge of bankruptcy. We had very little time left, and then Samsung stepped in. Now, Samsung was also already a major stockholder in AST, and they had decided, they knew exactly what condition we were in, and they had decided they wanted to take over AST. We were already buying a lot of our computers from Samsung and rebranding them around 1996 and 97, when we quit making some of the really, really horrible machines. In fact, this is an example of one. This is an AST Essentia M, and it's actually a Samsung Sense 500 with a different label on it. In fact, some retailers actually sold both machines right next to each other, and people would walk by and kind of look at them and go, these sure do look a lot alike. Because they were the exact same machine, just with a different name on them. And we actually did the tech support for that too. So on my phone, when I worked in the tech support department, when my phone would ring, it would actually say on the screen, it would either say Tandy, Grid, AST, or Samsung, and I would actually answer the phone, you know, Samsung tech support, depending upon what queue that they came in on. And which was fine. We actually liked supporting the Samsung products because they actually like worked generally, and they didn't blow up or catch on fire and that kind of stuff. They were usually just software configuration questions people were calling about. The AST laptops, when they call in, they were usually irate, and so we didn't like taking those calls quite as much. But Samsung had decided they wanted to take over the whole company instead of just being a stockholder, and they knew that we were going out of business. Samsung wanted to, they were already really popular selling their computers in Asia and Europe, and they didn't feel like they had a good, they didn't feel like they had a really strong presence in North America, and so they wanted they wanted AST to be that brand name. And so they were going to buy the whole company, and we were going to start selling all of our products. Were going to be Samsung products renamed to AST. And we were actually all pretty happy about that. We liked their products. We felt like they would probably be the savior of our company and bring back our reputation and whatnot. And everything was going great. They bought out the company. Everything was going real good. They knew it would take about 2 years to turn the company around, and Samsung was fully prepared to support us during that time in order to get everything turned around to profitability. Then we had the Asian stock market crash in 1997. And it didn't affect us here in the US much, but companies like Samsung, which is based out of South Korea, they had a problem. They knew they were going to be supporting our company for at least 2 years without making any money. And they were prepared to do that, but now, after the crash, the currency exchange rate changed to the point that it was going to cost them 8 times more money than what they had originally planned, just simply due to currency exchange rate. And so they, after about 3 months, made a decision and said, we can't support it. So they closed the doors and laid us all off. So that was pretty much the end of AST. It went out in a bang, just because of this. And I actually really liked working at AST. It was my first, I want to call it real job, where I actually got to use my skills as a person into computers. You know, I'd worked plenty of other jobs at grocery stores and stuff like that before, and so I felt like AST was a good place for me to be. It's actually even where I met my wife, and made a lot of good friends there. I had a lot of good times. I worked there for 3 years. And I felt like I had a career path there, so I was really bummed out about getting laid off and the company going out of business. One interesting thing that you might find, I don't know how many people will recognize this picture. This is the front of the building at Blizzard Entertainment, the ones who do StarCraft and Warcraft, Diablo, and all that kind of stuff. And they bought out the old AST building. So that's actually, that used to be AST corporate headquarters right there, and now it's Blizzard Entertainment. So hoping this battery lasts long enough, I want to move on to the second half of this. I'm calling it Tales from Tech Support. I want to tell you about some of the things that I had to deal with working in tech support. So we had about 500 people working there in tech support, just answering the phones. And about 75% of that staff was for the Advantage product line. That was the consumer product line. This was the line that you might have found at Walmart or Best Buy or something like that. And then, of course, we had laptops and businesses. The first year I worked there, I did work in Advantage. And then the second 2 years, I worked in the laptop department. And, of course, you get a little bit of different people calling these lines. I mean, like the business products line, most of the people were like IT people calling in, you know, so they kind of knew what they were doing in computers. The Advantage, you know, and this is something that's hard to explain, but back in the 90s, most people were buying their first ever computer. So a lot of the people that were calling in didn't know much about computers at all. And this is me. I was about 21 years old there. I had hair. And the picture quality is terrible because this was taken on the first ever digital camera, the Casio SA something or another, I forgot what it's called, but I bought one, and everybody thought its picture quality was terrible, and it was. But there's a whole bunch, hundreds of pictures I would not have today if I hadn't bought that digital camera. So even though the picture quality was bad, yeah, that was my computer that I used to. Actually, I played games on that computer a lot while I was talking on the phone. That's one of the things that we did. Because the phone, you know, I could be walking to somebody through and reinstalling Windows, for example. That was a common thing we did. That's a 30, 45-minute phone call right there. And it's like I've done it a million times. I don't need to look at my computer. So I'd be playing like Duke Nukem 3D or something like that. We all did that, and nobody cared. The bosses didn't care. They did it too. So we even had multiplayer games of StarCraft going sometimes while we were working. So yeah, that was pretty cool. Yeah, this is our Visionary Performers wall where you got to put your handprint if you were considered like one of the best, you know, most knowledgeable, best techs that we had. And yeah, I got to put my handprint there. So I was really proud about that. And this is actually a picture that ended up in a magazine, but that's actually from my department. And I'm in this photo, but I'm far away in the back and I'm about 3 pixels tall, so you can't actually see me. But I know who all these people are fact, this black guy here on the left, his name was Sean, and I actually just found out about 2 weeks ago that he passed away just recently. I was kind of sad to hear that. Anyway, but yeah, I know who all these people are, and that's what our office looked like. Now, one of the things you cannot see in this picture is if you could just zoom the camera, pan the camera up just a bit, you can see on the back wall we had all these big LED billboard screens, and they would show like all the calls on hold, like how many calls are in each queue, how long they've been waiting, you know, all this kind of stuff. So when you come in for work, like you'd immediately be able to look up as you're walking over to your cube and see, all right, looks like the wait time today is 2 hours, so they're going to be ticked off when I answer the phone, you know, because people always are if they have to wait 2 hours for get tech support. And I want to draw your attention to the fact that this is what a modern call center looks like. And so things are very different today, not only in how much they cram them in like sardines today, but also just from, I'll get to that in a minute. I hit the wrong button, but just from a matter of training. So when I hired in at AST, I had a grueling interview process where they'd ask me all these troubleshooting questions like, how would you solve this or that? And if they didn't like my answer, they weren't going to hire me. And then once they did hire people, they sent us to a 3-week-long training process where they would train us on all the intricate details of these specific machines and what goes wrong with them, how to fix them, and then, you know, customer interactions. And they'd put us on the phone with another experienced tech for like a week where we just listen in. And then once they turned us loose on the phone, I mean, it was our job to listen to what the customer said was wrong and figure it out and, you know, decide what you know, how should we troubleshoot this? How should we fix it? Today, in these, there we go. Today in these call centers like this, they just hire people, you know, it's like if they got a pulse, you're hired. And all you got to do is read the screen. And if the customer tells you this, find something on the list that matches what the customer said, it'll tell you what to reply. You know, the person on the phone is nothing more than an interface between the customer and the computer. You know, I'd just rather be talking to the computer, to be honest. I hate it when I have to call in about my cable modem. You know, the block sync light will go out on it sometimes after a big storm or something. And, you know, I've got no internet connection to my house, but I call tech support and I'll get one of these guys, and they're usually over in like India or something, and I'll tell them, well, the block sync light's out on my modem, I've got no connection. Can you send a line tech out? And they're like, well, we got to check your IP address and let's check for malware and let's check. I'm like, it's so frustrating because it's like going into a car dealer and your wheel's falling off your car and you're telling the technician, look, my wheel fell off my car, can we get this fixed? And then they get in your car and they're checking your radio stations to make sure they're right. Like, well, make sure there's gas in the car and you got radio stations set right. I'm like, don't you see the wheel over here? But the problem is these guys, they're just not trained. They don't understand what it even means, you know, if your block sync light is off on your cable modem, you know. They just got to walk you through whatever the computer says. So very big contrast between what tech support was like in the 90s versus today. And the sad part is, back in the 90s, we had really high-trained techs. In fact, I used to get calls from IT people, like, all the time about our laptop. I would walk IT people through how to set up their TCP/IP stacks and stuff like that. And I'm sitting there the whole time on the phone thinking, this guy probably makes twice what I make, or 3 times what I make, and I'm doing his job for him. You know, today, it's like you call in the call center, the customers know more than the people do answering the phone, which is, you know, just kind of sad, but it's a very, very different scenario. But anyway, yeah, so I'll tell you about some of the crazy calls I've had. So the cup holder call, that's something people always joke about. I never did receive a cup holder call before. However, the guy next to me did. And he was mad because it had retracted after his computer rebooted and it spilled coffee all over his keyboard. And he wanted us to send him a new keyboard, which we didn't do after we told him what that was for. Probably the only dumbest other call we got besides that was the lady, and I didn't get this call either, it was another one of my coworkers. She called in and she didn't know, had no idea how to use a computer. And he kept telling her how to click this, click that with your mouse, and she didn't seem to know what a mouse was. And after he described to her what a mouse physically looked like, she says, oh, that's the thing I put on the floor, I thought it was a foot pedal. And so, you know, that just to give you an idea of what some of these people calling in, I mean, they had no concept of what they were doing. These serial numbers and part numbers were some of the bane of my existence in tech support. So when people would be online or on hold for 2 hours, waiting to get to get a call, There would be, of course, some music playing. But also during that time, there would be a recording that would come on about every 3 minutes saying, please have your part number and serial number ready, or you will not be able to receive technical support. And yet, probably less than half of the people actually had it ready when I answered the phone. The first thing they wanted to do is spend 10 minutes griping at me about how long they've waited on phone. Do you know how long I have been waiting on hold? Yes, sir, my phone says you've been waiting on hold 73 minutes and 16 seconds. They were always surprised to find out that I actually knew the answer to that question. And then I'm like, can I have your serial number, please? Well, I don't want to get that. It's on the back of the computer. I don't want to reach it. Where is that? Whatever. And then why did I have to wait on hold so long? And sometimes I'd actually have to tell them when they'd argue too much about it. I'm like, well, the last 10 people didn't have their serial number ready either. And that's why you had to wait on hold so long. So if you could just get that for me. And then, of course, they'd want to read me the serial number off the bottom of their keyboard. And I'm like, no, I need the one on the computer. They're like, oh, you mean the serial number on the back of the monitor? Here, I'll get you that. No, 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 I need the one on the computer. Oh, you mean the one on the hard drive? Yeah, the hard drive. Okay, yeah, just give me that one, okay? And, you know, this is an example of what it would look like. And I always tell them it's the one with the barcode. Actually, this one is unusual. It has several barcodes. Most of them look like this, where there would just be like 2 numbers, part number and serial number with a barcode. That was more the standard label that we have. And they'd want to read me FCC IDs and all kinds of crazy stuff. I don't know why it was so hard to find these, but it was always the bane of my existence, trying to get these, you know, these serial numbers out. And they never understood why they had to give them to me. And, you know, then they'd go on asking some question, and I'm like, well, I don't know the answer to that without knowing what kind of computer you've got. Well, I've got an AST. Well, thanks. That narrows it down to about 600 different machine configurations, you know. You can give me that serial number, I'll know exactly what you got, you know. But, there. So this is something that's really hard to explain. We could not see people's screens, right? So, you know, today a lot of times you can do remote connects and stuff like that, and they can see what you're doing on your screen. We couldn't. I mean, we had to deal with whatever we could hear them tell us, and a lot of times we had to use our extra senses, which was just to listen to what they're typing. And as you know, in this particular example, you know, it was very common for me to tell people to type something. And then we'd come back with some nonsensical error that would make no sense whatsoever, because people didn't know the difference between a colon, and a semicolon, or a slash, or a backslash. And we had to go to the command prompt a lot and tell people to type things. And so if I were to tell them something like, you know, type CD space DOS, and I hear a lot of extra keystrokes, I would eventually realize that they're typing something crazy like this. This is very common, actually, and I'd have to tell them, like, you know, that was an awful lot of keystrokes there. Are you using the space bar when I tell you to type? Oh, okay. You know, you know, sometimes people would click stuff, and there'd be messages on the error messages on the screen, and I'm asking them, well, can you read me what's on the screen? And they'd read me the clock, or they'd read me some other little thing, and there's some big error message flashing in the middle of the screen, and they don't even see that for some reason. You know, and it can be really, really challenging sometimes. This is a pretty funny story. I actually dealt with this on more than one occasion. Does anybody here remember WinFax? So, okay, for those who didn't raise your hand, this is a program we bundled with our AST computers, and it was a program for sending faxes from your computer. That's something we actually did back in the 90s. We sent faxes. And, well, the way it worked is you just went into, like, I don't know, word processor or spreadsheet or something like that, and then when you wanted to send the fax, you would hit print, and WinFax was installed as a print driver. And so one of the listed printers available would be WinFax, and you click that, and it would ask you for a phone number, you type it in, and fax it off to whatever number you put in there. Unfortunately, there was a word or a phrase in the WinFax manual that says something to the effect of, you know, once you've reached this point, whatever's on your screen will be faxed. And I had a few calls where people could not understand how this was working, and I kept telling them, well, can you read me what it says here, or, you know, here or there in that box or whatever? And they said, well, I can't because the paper's in the way. And I'm like, paper's in the way? Well, can you move the paper? And they're like, well, it's the paper I'm trying to fax. I'm holding it up to the screen. And I'll be like, well, why are you doing that? And they'll say, well, it says right here in the WinFax manual, whatever's on my screen will be faxed at this point. So I have to explain to them, well, your screen is not a scanner, you know. That's talking about whatever the computer is displaying on the screen, not what you're putting on the screen. So, yeah, I can only imagine, you know, trying to push something up the screen there and fax that. CD-ROMs, these were a little bit of a pain in some of the early days too. I don't know why my microphone keeps getting on here. So, one problem we had, especially in the early days, is a lot of our AST computers shipped with 5¼ inch floppy drives on a lot of the 386 and 46 machines. So people would invariably go to the store, they'd buy a new game and come on CD-ROM, they're like, wonder where this goes. Well, it looks like it fits in there. So, and it did fit in there all right, but it didn't work. So they called me up on the phone, and it'd take me sometimes to figure out what was going on, because they're like, well, I put the CD in my CD-ROM drive and it doesn't work. And fortunately, I'd have their serial number, and I could look it up and say, well, your computer didn't ship with a CD-ROM drive. Oh, yes, it did. Yes, it absolutely shipped with this. I'm like, can you describe what your CD-ROM looks like? Well, yeah, it's got that little handle that you turn, 90 degrees. I'm like, no, that's not a CD-ROM drive. Well, how do I get that disk out of there? And I'm like, I have no idea. You can try turning it upside down and see if it'll fall out, I guess. But the other problem we had is, and that's why I've got a picture here of CD recordables, is, of course, CD-R was just coming out at this time. So these people would see these CD recordables on the shelf at, Computer City or Radio Shack, whatever, and they would just assume, hey, this will work in anything, right? So they take them home, put them in their CD-ROM drives, and it wouldn't work. And of course, they call me up on the phone and say, well, my CD-ROM drive is broken. And when they tell me why, I'd be like, well, CD-ROM stands for read-only memory. It doesn't write. And of course, some of them were actually really ticked off about that. And I'm like, well, I don't want to tell you. Oh, speakerphones. I got a lot to talk about speakerphones. First thing I want to tell you is people used to call me on speakerphones. I hated it. I could never hear half the time what they were saying. And they never realized how difficult that was. People also had some other annoying phone habits. Sometimes they would be eating a 10-course meal while they call me. Yeah, I'm having trouble. I'm having trouble with my computer. Oh, that's so annoying. Some moms would call in with crying babies on their shoulders. That you couldn't hear anything. And I felt bad for them because I know they'd waited on hold 2 hours. The baby probably just started crying, but what can they do, But unfortunately, sometimes it was impossible to hear what they're saying, crying baby. But the biggest thing about speakerphones is we actually included them on the computers. We actually had this modem, this terrible modem. It's called a Starbright modem, and we used to include these in the computers. And they had a couple of features that they thought was cool at the time, which was it doubled as an answering machine. Actually, it doubled as a sound card. It was a sound card and a modem in one card. And it also worked as an answering machine, fax machine, and a speakerphone using one of those stupid little microphones that you sit on your desk. They never worked right. The software they included was crashing all the time. I must have helped thousands of people reinstall that software because sometimes that was the only way to get it to work again. 3 days later, it would break and quit working again. It was just terrible. It was terrible software. Didn't work right. But the thing is, I cannot tell you how many times, after about the third or fourth time, somebody would call in with one of their this modem not working, or particularly this application not working. They did the speakerphone thing. Is they would say, I spent $3,000 on this computer, and the only thing I wanted it for was a speakerphone, and it doesn't work, and I want my money back. And unfortunately, we're not allowed to be rude to the customers or condescending or anything, but so badly, I always wanted to tell them, guys, if you just go down to Radio Shack, they sell speakerphones for about $12, and they work every time, But we're not allowed to tell them that. But I must have had at least 30 people tell me they spent $3,000 on a speakerphone. So that's just absolutely crazy. Processors, another little bane of my existence there because, well, for one thing, there were a lot of little diagnostic programs out there. Some of them were actually in the computer that came in like the DOS folder that's part of MS-DOS. I don't remember what it was called, some kind of little Microsoft diagnostic program. And they were really good at identifying XT and 286 and 386 machines, but they weren't really so good at identifying anything else. And every now and then somebody would think they're getting smart, learned how to use the command prompt, or they bought some kind of diagnostic program somewhere or whatever, and they run it, it tells them all this stuff about their computer, and what would it do? It would say their processor was a 386, or 486, or whatever the latest processor that particular diagnostic program knows how to recognize. So what would they do? They call me up on the phone, irate as can be, demanding, I spent $3,000 for this computer, and it's supposed to have a Pentium 166 in it. And I just ran this program and it says, you ripped me off, it's got a 386 in it. I want my do you explain that to somebody? I would often tell them, well, take the cover off the computer, pull the fan off, look at it if you don't believe me. A lot of people thought it would void their warranty to open their computer, but you know, it wouldn't. You had to be able to open your computer to put cards and stuff in there. But yeah, that's what I used. I literally, and I had to stay on the phone sometimes and walk people through how to take the case off their computer, how to get the fan off the chip so they could look and actually see that it was a Pentium MMX 166 and not a 386. And people just absolutely wouldn't believe me, thought that we'd really ripped them off. But another bizarre thing about CPUs that I'll never to this day understand, because I had this call more than one time, where somebody would go out, you know, you always got the person who wants the latest and greatest thing, right? So they go out and they buy like a Pentium 166 computer. They think they've got the top of the line. Then they call me up on the phone and say, I just bought and I spent $3,000. Yeah, how many times have I heard this? But then it's supposed to be the latest and greatest computer on the market. Upgrade me for free. And I'm like, why? He said, well, because I was told this was the latest and greatest. I'm like, well, it was 2 weeks ago. We can't just stop innovating just because you bought a computer. You know? But that was a fairly common call. To this day, I cannot comprehend why somebody think they would be that entitled. I mean, it'd be like calling up Apple saying, I want a new iPhone because you came out with a new one and I didn't, you know, I don't know. You know. Alright, so now I'm done talking about stupid customers, and although most of our techs were pretty smart, we had a lot of really hardworking, really smart techs. We did have a handful that, I don't know how they kept their jobs. In fact, one of them worked right next to me for a while, and this is exactly how I know he used to do this. When he got a call he didn't know what the answer was to, if it wasn't something quick and easy, he would tell people, oh, well, run ScanDisk and then run defrag, knowing that that's going to take several hours on a Windows 95 machine. And if that doesn't work, just call us back. And so, guess who usually got the call back after, you know, because he knew it'd probably go to a different technician, right, when he answered. It was usually me, and so, yeah, and so now the customer's twice as mad because he's had to wait on hold twice to get in, and yeah, that used to drive me absolutely mad, and you know, I took on average 25 calls a day in an 8-hour work day. That was in the laptop department, that's where this guy was. In the Advantage department, I took on average 15 calls a day. And you might think, well, that doesn't sound like very many, but you know, average time to spend on the phone with a customer back then was 30 minutes to an hour, walking them through whatever fix we could do or whatnot. So, yeah, I mean, you'd think you'd be able to do, but this guy, he always wanted his stats to look better, right? Because that was one of the ways that we were judged, was by our stats. How many calls did you take a day? And so this guy, I mean, he had like 50 calls a day. So his stats looked really good. But my boss, you know, one of the things they did, of course, you know, they always warn you that your call could be monitored or recorded or whatever. And yeah, my boss, he listened into our calls, and he knew that when I got the calls, by golly, when they got off the phone with me, they were either fixed or they were on their way to being fixed, like I was shipping them a part or, you know, whatever needed to happen to get them back on the road again. So he knew that even though my stats weren't as good, that I was taking care of the customers, and that's what, you know, he felt really mattered, even though corporate liked the numbers to be better. We also had another technician who, he was a good technician. He knew, he was hardworking, and he was smart, and he was good at solving problems, but he had one bizarre habit. And he worked 2 cubes down from me. And we had a mute button on our phone. The way the mute button worked, of course, you push the button and a little light comes on telling you it's muted, and then you push the button again. It's a toggle button. It's not one where you would hold it in or something like that. And you know, he'd get the, you know, the stupid customers on the phone that know what they were doing. And what he would be is he would just be talking to them real nonchalant, like, yeah, go ahead and click on this and this. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he'd click that mute button, and he'd be like, yell almost at the top of his voice, you bleepity bleep, stupid idiot, can't you figure out the difference between bleep, bleepity bleep, bleep? Sometimes my customers actually hear this, like, over my headset, and they're like, is that one of your technicians talking to a customer like that? And I was like, oh no, he's having an argument with another employee, you know, sorry about that, or whatever. But one day, he hit that mute button thinking he toggled it, and that LED didn't light up. He went off on a customer like that, and then when he went to hit that mute button again, he realized, oops. And yeah, that got escalated up to the boss, and he didn't do that anymore after that. So it was kind of amusing to listen to it sometimes, but that stopped after that call. He didn't get fired, surprisingly. But anyway, I think that actually wraps up my presentation. Now, what time is it now? 9:13. Well, yeah, I guess that's about where we're supposed to be. Oops. So I guess I have a little time for questions. Anybody had any questions? Yeah, I see one in the back there in the blue shirt.
Me?
Yeah.
My mom's an Avon lady who doesn't know probably half the customers.
Unfortunately, I can't hear. Do we have a microphone to pass around? Usually they do. But.
My mom had to physically go to someone's house to explain that if a printer isn't plugged in, it will not work.
Oh. Yeah. Okay, so who else had their hand raised? Yeah, you're right there.
How's Planet X3 going?
Well, if I could have my laptop hooked up, I could show it to you. But it's come along pretty well. I think I'm about 80% done. I've run into a few problems. I ran into a overflow problem on my assembler the other day, so I may have to switch to a new assembler because it may not be able to handle the size of source code I'm dealing with. But otherwise, it's going along pretty well. Yes, sir.
How many DVI to HDMI cables do you think you'll get after this?
Probably not that many. It's not going to be on my channel, so yeah. Plus, I already have one. But yeah, you there right there?
You mentioned that working at AST was the first tech job or real tech job you've had. What other tech jobs did you have after that?
Well, I worked for AT&T for a year installing cable modems in 1999, right after I got laid off for AT&T. And boy, I got a lot of stories from that too. Sometime I'll compile, because I went from house to house installing those cable modems. And then after that, I worked at a computer store. I was the service manager for 5 years, from 2000 to 2005. And I got some stories from that too. And then I worked in the IT field from 2006 up until 2016 when I started doing this full time.
Thanks.
So, yes, sir.
Yeah. Have you do you have any opinions on nostalgia for kind of the Mac era, kind of in the early 2000s? I just don't see much of that. Do you have any opinions on that?
I think it's kind of the same way with PCs from the same time era. I just don't think there's anything. I can't always predict the future, but it just doesn't seem like there's going to be much future nostalgia for those any more than there would be for ASTs or Dells or anything else. I could be wrong, but I just don't see it because there's nothing unique about them, really, So I think you had a question there.
Yeah, so the funny thing is mine's actually kind of tangentially related to his. I was going to ask you, had you thought about porting Planet X3 to classic Mac?
I've been asked to do ports to everything from Mac to Amiga to Linux and everything else, but it's just kind of one of those things. It's a year-long process to do the port for me, and I can only do so many. This will probably be the last one. I've got some other projects I want to start after I'm done with that one. So. Yeah. Any other questions? Let's go over there.
Do you have any plans to release the source to any of your games after they've had a chance to sell?
I've been asked that a lot. I tentatively speaking, I think I am going to release the source once I've sold most of the copies and whatnot. Because I don't think that people steal it. Everybody knows I wrote it, right? So it's not like I have to worry about protecting that. And I think if people could learn from the source, then maybe there'll be more PC games coming out. So yeah, I'm actually kind of seriously considering releasing the source code. Yeah. Yes, sir.
What are your plans after Planet X3?
I'm wanting to build a computer. Yeah, a little 8-bit computer. So it's kind of, I'll go into that later. There's a lot to talk about on that. Okay, who else had a question? I guess you're on that.
What system has your favorite implementation of BASIC?
Probably the Commodore Plus 4. I know that, you know, it had all the graphics commands and had a built-in ML monitor and sound commands, all that kind of stuff, in a Commodore environment. But it was faster than the 128 because the CPU actually is clocked faster than the Plus4, and the basic on the Plus4 is a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for, efficient. And so it runs a little better than the 128. But yeah, I mean the 64, I like the basic on the 64, but it's lacking those graphics commands, and that's kind of the reason I wouldn't pick that. So, somebody's pointing at, oh yes. Just anybody, somebody, the child there, I guess, yeah.
What is your favorite Apple computer?
Favorite Apple? Are we talking from the 8-bit era or the 16 or 32-bit era? Because that could include a Mac or you mean like the old like Apple II series computers or?
The Macintosh.
Of the Macintosh? My favorite Mac ever is probably the iBook clamshell.
Yeah.
But yeah, that one. And my favorite of the or more classic ones would be the 2GS probably. The black shirt there again.
What is the weirdest thing that you have found in a computer case, like when you open it up, like buying it used or whatever, like what is the weirdest thing that you found in the case?
Well, that would be a story actually from when I worked at the computer store as a service manager. She knows what I'm going to say. They brought it in. They said it wouldn't power on. I opened the top up. There must have been 3,000 live roaches in there, crawling all over each other. I actually called my boss over, the store manager, and said, I've never had anything like this. Do you want me to work on this? And he just, without saying a word at all, he just picked it up without the cover on and carried it out. There were roaches crawling out of it all over the place, all over his arms, all over, just falling all over the floor. He took it outside in the parking lot and just turned it upside down, and it was like the pavement suddenly turned black and then spread. It was and then he handed it back to the customer and told him to go get the top piece and just don't come back. So, that's the strangest thing. I'm sure you were probably wondering about computer hardware being inside of there, but...
No, that was the perfect answer.
Yeah, way back in the back there.
Literal bugs.
What's that?
Literal bugs.
Literal bugs, yeah. That computer had bugs, yeah, literally. I don't know when I need to stop. Technically, I think my panel was over 5 minutes ago, but there's nobody coming after me. So anyway, I guess I can take a few more questions. Yes, sir.
When are you gonna do more 8-bit keys?
Oh, I know. So 8-bit keys, yeah, I haven't done any in like 4 months. Convention season has been really tough on me because I've done a bunch of them, especially during the summer. It was the point I was literally just going home, I'd get like 4 or 5 days to try to slap a video together, and then I'd be going off to another convention. And so actually both channels suffered. My average had been like 6 videos per month, and I've been doing like 3 per month for the last few months. And 8-bit keys just keeps getting pushed to the back burner because 8-bit keys doesn't make me that much money. And so, you know, since I do this for a living now, I kind of had, it's like, well, if I can only make 3 videos a month, I guess they're going to have to go on the channel that makes me money. So, but I've got actually at least 6 8-bit keys episodes partially scripted. I thought I was going to get one done this month, but maybe next month. So, yes, sir.
If you could wipe any computer line out of existence as a mistake, what would you wipe out?
Any throughout all of history?
Anything that frustrated you to the point of near madness?
I'll have to think on that one bit. Yeah, sorry. Yes, sir.
What's the most interesting but also unexplored, like new innovation you've seen in a computer?
Like today?
Just like in all history.
I don't know. I have to think about that one too. Sorry, I don't have a good answer for you on that one. But it's a good question. Maybe I'll have an answer for you later. Oh, I see there's some hands back there in the back. Yeah, you there.
I've really been enjoying the Commodore Mystery series you've been doing. I was wondering how far you're planning on taking that, maybe like to the end of the Amiga line, or
Yeah, so the next one's going to be about the Amiga. I'm not going to devote an episode for each Amiga because they all run more or less the same software. So I'm just going to have one episode for the Amiga, try to cover all of it, cram it all into one video if I can. And then I also want to cover the Commodore PC clones that they did, like the Colt and the PC3. And then I also going to have another one just kind of covering some of the accessories that Commodore did in more detail, like the disk drives and the modems and all that kind of stuff. So I have at least 3 more videos planned for the Commodore History Series. And then when I get it all done, I'm going to put it on a Blu-ray as one big series. So, yeah. Yeah, there was another question right there at the end there.
My younger sister is a teacher, and she says she has a lot of students who imagine that when they grow up they're going to be YouTubers. Do you have any practical advice for them?
Make sure you have a plan B. That's probably the biggest source of advice. The other piece of advice is to understand that it's not as easy as it looks. I get that question asked a lot, actually, and I'll tell people that my 30-minute videos that people like watching usually take me between 50 and 60 hours to produce. And the people that think they're YouTube stars and they have like 10 subscribers and they're always asking me to give them shout outs and stuff, they take 5 minutes to make a 5-minute video. And so, yeah, and then they always ask me for advice, and that's what I tell them. I'm like, well, look, your 5-minute video looks like it took you about 5 minutes to make it. You need to spend about 50 or 60 hours on a video if you want, and then you need to do that over and over and over again, and you'll build your own audience, and you don't need shout outs from me or whatever. But yeah, you've got to be willing to put the time in, put the effort in, and start with a script. That's what I always start with. I can sometimes spend 4 or 5, I think one time I spent 10 hours just writing the script before I even started shooting anything. So yeah, those are the 2 biggest pieces of advice I give. I actually ended up, sheer coincidence, I never planned to be a YouTuber. It was never on my plan. And it just kind of happened by luck, I guess. It was a hobby, and I put a lot of work into it, but I never thought I'd be standing in front of you guys today. Even 3 years ago, I never thought that I would be successful. So. I should probably wrap this up. So, it's always guys in trouble. Whose laptop is this? Oh, there you are. Yeah. You should probably give me your laptop. Thank you for letting me use it. Big hand for this guy, too.